By the middle of next century, over 40% of the world's population could be living in areas with severe water stress, as climate change adds to the pressure of global growth. The OECD says that demand for water will increase by 55% by 2050, with 4 billion people living in water-stressed areas. Professor Greg Leslie joins us now, Director of the University of New South Wales Global Water Institute and Professor at the School of Chemical Engineering. Now, extreme water events are becoming more frequent, along with a higher risk of drought. How urgent is it that we find new solutions for water management in our major cities?
Oh, look, it's very urgent. The other demographic trend is that more people are living in the cities than in the countryside, and more of our cities are being located in coastal areas. So not only are there population pressures, but there's also pressures associated with the changing climate and how we have to deal with extremes. So massive storm events, high rainfall, much higher than we've had previously, because as the atmosphere warms, it holds more water. But then the ocean cycles that move rainfall around the planet are changing. So we then transition into extended periods where we have below average rainfall. So it's dealing with those extremes, the changes in the frequency and the intensity of rainfall events make managing water in urban areas really tricky.
But then on top of all of that, you only need to look at what we've been through in the last couple of years, which of course is the COVID-19 pandemic, and the impact on the built environment, the impact on cities as a result of that with the work from home movement, which many out there, many experts certainly that we're talking to here at APAC Network are telling us it's here to stay, some version of that. So we've got to overlay that with all of the work that you're doing on water management, with the potential for people moving out of cities.
That's right. So there's, in the more developed countries, there's definitely the tree change, or moving away from the cities to the rural areas where you've got good internet connectivity. So that's definitely one trend. But the population growth, what's happening in our urban areas is going to continue, particularly in the developing world. Because that's where the jobs and that's where the opportunities are in those areas. So cities and regional areas are going to need to diversify their sources of water to get them through the drought, the drier periods. Cities on the coast have the luxury of going to seawater desalination, but that needs to be supplemented with water recycling. Then during the wet events, we have urban flooding, we have and regional flooding. So there needs to be a rethink in the strategies around managing water during the wet events. In urban areas, that comes down to a lot of redesign of the cities and the streetscape to do a better job holding water. To we call them sponge cities, where they can store that water. That plays a really important role also in another phenomena that goes hand in glove with water supply, and that's rising temperatures, particularly in the urban areas. If we have more green space, more tree canopy, we can attenuate those increases in temperature. And trees need water. So we have some parts of the city that I'm in Sydney, the western part of the Sydney only has about 28% of the tree cover that the coastal or eastern part of the city has. And they're projected to have a difference of around about 10 degrees between the west and the east, 8 out of 10 days moving forward. So the way to attenuate that is to get the tree cover up. And in order to do that, we need to provide more water to grow those trees. And so capturing stormwater, recycling water in a what we refer to as water-sensitive urban design is going to be key to that.
All of these types of things, obviously with water infrastructure ageing in the majority of our cities, certainly here in Australia, is going to come at significant investment. How do you see this panning out? I mean, is this purely a government problem? Do you expect the private sectors to step in here in terms of investment dollars?
So that's a really good question. You know what? We enjoy really good water and wastewater infrastructure mainly because of multiple generations of investment. So, you know, you have asset lives for water infrastructure that stretch to 50 to 100 years, sometimes even more. So it's capital intensive, but the assets are spread over a long period of time. That really is the place for government. And what the government can do there is that they can stop or can work more cooperatively with other forms of urban development. So that's where the private sector can get involved. There's a good example of that in the west of Sydney with the development of the second airport. So they're actually planning the water, the utilities, the gas, electricity, the telecom, and the roads in a more coordinated way. And that's a better role. Where the private sector can get involved is in the operation, the short-term, year-to-year, making sure that those assets are maintained, operating the assets to deliver the water to the customers. And so a blend of that, the government with the long-term planning, the coordination, the intergenerational investment, coupled with the private sector getting involved in the operation of the assets and finding innovative ways there is probably the optimum mix. In regional areas where the population density is smaller, a lot of that really still is dependent upon the government. And so then that needs to be an issue of balancing, revenues from the high population centres to the lower population centres to make sure that they get adequate water infrastructure. That's particularly true where you've got a lot of First Nations communities that simply don't have the tax base to afford it. That's really still the role for government.
Professor, we started off this conversation with talking about, sort of the timeline and how urgent it was. And you said it's really urgent that we do come up with these new solutions and we do make changes to our ageing infrastructure. What is the actual timeline? I mean, how much time do we have to get this right?
Well, it's for the water supply side, I think we've got the luxury that we have a bit more time because the demand is very linear. Where we don't have the time is in the extreme events, be that, we've just seen the floods. And I think what was a 1% or a 1 in 100-year event is becoming more frequent. So we're moving into a period where that is going to become the norm. The risk on the east coast of Australia and in other places where we're seeing a lot of rainfall because of the Indian Ocean dipole and La Nina, that will swing back to drier conditions. And so we'll have a bit of time to plan for the drier conditions and ramping up investment there. But really, I think in the short term, it's dealing with the extreme events, be they floods, be they bushfires, where they come on really fast and they're going to likely be more frequent.